In 1971, President Nixon made a monumental decision that would reverberate around the globe. He took America off the gold standard, a move that stunned economists and politicians alike. This meant that our money was no longer tied to gold, a system that had been in place for decades. Instead, it became fiat money, its value based on trust and the government's promise, rather than something tangible like gold. This Nixon shock changed everything, sending ripples through the global financial system. Suddenly, the rules of the financial game were different. The world was watching closely. Some were deeply worried. Would this unprecedented move make America less stable? Would it lead to economic chaos? Others, however, were hopeful. Maybe this new system was more flexible, better suited to adapt to the rapidly changing global economy and ready for the future. What everyone agreed on was this: things would never be the same. The financial landscape had been irrevocably altered. This change wasn't just about money, it was about power, control, and the shifting dynamics of global influence. It was about the future and how nations would navigate the uncharted waters of a new economic era. And in a way no one expected, it would be about love and relationships too. The ripple effects of this decision would touch every aspect of life, from the way people saved and spent money to how they planned for their futures and built their lives together. At the same time that Nixon was shaking up the financial world, another revolution was brewing. This one was about sex. The sexual revolution challenged old rules and ideas about relationships. The invention of the birth control pill gave women more control over their bodies. They could choose when and if they wanted to have children. This new freedom changed the dating game. Casual relationships became more common. Marriage was no longer the only option. With these new freedoms came new questions. What did it mean to be a man or a woman in this new world? How did people navigate love and relationships when the old rules no longer applied? Hypergamy is a big word. It might sound complex, but it's actually quite simple. It means simply that people are drawn to partners they see as above them in some way. This attraction can be based on various factors. This could be in terms of looks, money, status, or even social connections. People often seek partners who they believe can elevate their own standing in society, or any combination of these things. It's a multifaceted concept that can vary greatly from person to person. It's a natural human tendency, and it has always existed. From ancient times to modern days, people have always sought to improve their social standing through their relationships. But the Nixon shock and the sexual revolution created a perfect storm that intensified hypergamy. These events brought about significant changes in society. With the gold standard gone, inflation became a problem. The economy was in turmoil, and people had to adapt to new financial realities. The cost of living went up, and families needed two incomes to maintain their lifestyle. This economic pressure changed the dynamics of family life. This meant women were entering the workforce in record numbers. They were no longer confined to traditional roles and were seeking new opportunities. At the same time, the sexual revolution was telling women they could have it all: careers, relationships, and personal fulfillment. This was a radical shift in societal norms. So women began to apply their hypergamous instincts to both their careers and their love lives. They were looking for partners who could match their ambitions and support their goals. This shift has had a lasting impact on modern relationships and continues to shape the way people approach dating and marriage today. The combination of economic change and evolving gender roles put a lot of pressure on men. The 1970s was a decade of significant transformation, marked by economic instability and shifting societal norms. The economic crisis of the era, characterized by high inflation and unemployment, created a challenging environment for everyone, but men in particular felt the weight of these changes. Men were traditionally seen as the primary breadwinners, and this role was deeply ingrained in their identity. However, as the economy faltered, many men found it increasingly difficult to fulfill this expectation. The pressure to provide financially was compounded by the evolving gender roles that were emerging during this time. They were still expected to be providers, but the definition of provider was changing. No longer was it sufficient to simply bring home a paycheck. The societal expectations were shifting, and men were now being asked to contribute in ways that went beyond financial support. The traditional roles were being redefined, and men had to adapt to new responsibilities. This included taking on more domestic chores and being more involved in family financial planning. The era saw the rise of dual-income households, and men had to navigate this new landscape. It wasn't enough to just bring home a paycheck anymore. Men were expected to be more present in their families' lives, to engage in household activities, and to support their partners in new and meaningful ways. This shift required a significant adjustment in mindset and behavior. Men were also told they needed to be more emotionally available, more in touch with their feelings. This was a stark departure from the stoic, unemotional image that had been the norm for generations. The rise of therapy and support groups during this time reflected a growing awareness of the importance of emotional health. More in touch with their feelings, men were encouraged to express their emotions and seek support when needed. This was a challenging transition for many, as it required them to confront long-held beliefs about masculinity and vulnerability. They had to compete with a growing number of successful and independent women in the dating pool. The rise of feminism and the increasing presence of women in the workforce meant that traditional gender dynamics were being upended. Men had to navigate relationships in a world where women were no longer dependent on them for financial security. Some men thrived in this new environment. They embraced the changes and found new ways to define their roles. Others struggled to adapt, finding it difficult to reconcile the new expectations with their traditional upbringing. The era was marked by a sense of uncertainty and a search for identity. This period of rapid change led to confusion and resentment. The old rules no longer applied, and both men and women were trying to figure out their places in this new world. Protests and social movements reflected the broader societal upheaval as people grappled with these changes. Men and women were trying to figure out their roles in a world where the old rules no longer applied. Couples sought counseling to navigate their relationships, and social settings became arenas for negotiating new norms. The 1970s was a decade of transformation, and the pressure to adapt was felt by all. Many new cultural forms were tried out during this time. These experiments were often referred to as sects.